Project director at Stages of Freedom, which we want to make you aware, if you're not, that we now have our own storefront, which includes a museum of African American history in Rhode Island, currently showing Do Lord Remember Me, the Black Church in Rhode Island. The other part of our space is a shop in which everything has been donated, including books, art, bric-a-brac, small furnishings, all of that pays for swimming lessons for children of color. And then every third Thursday, which would be this coming Thursday, tomorrow, we have the Freedom Factor, which is a salon of African American arts and ideas. Tomorrow we have two women from the Warren Historical Society talking about their extraordinary 10-year research on slavery in Warren, Rhode Island. It's an extraordinary talk. There are still some seats available for that because this hurricane has sort of scared a lot of people. So as we see, it's not as daunting as we thought. Our first installment, which many of you I'm sure were at Rochambeau Library of the Lippitt Hill Oral History, was packed at the end of June, and we came to PPL because we figured we needed a larger space. So with those who are going to be speaking tonight, please come to the stage. That would be Naomi and Meredith, and who else is from Lippitt Hill who will join us here on stage. Where's Naomi? There she is. So this evening, Ray Rickman, Executive Director of Stages of Freedom, is going to moderate our conversation. And please welcome Ray.
Okay, now, so I'm going to try one more time and then I'm just going to talk without it. Yes. Rob, you want to give this a prayerful try? Yours is in the one of stuff. Can you pick it up and see if it works? You say hello.
Hello.
One.
Hello.
So I'm going to I'll talk as loud as I can and hope it works, and I'm mic'd for this. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful.
Here you go.
Ray, do you want this?
Here you go, Ray.
Yes, until we get that. Geniuses. Thank you. In 1992, about 60 people gathered on College Hill to do oral history of blacks on College Hill. It was a fascinating gathering. About 65 people came, and they talked, and we captured the history. And it's only in paper. It's good reading, but it's only in paper. Time flies, and electronic everything is more important than it was. So this time we're capturing these history in both in paper and on video, and we may do something else additional, and then people will actually get their own copy of the film, we'll call it. So what happened in '92 is about 75 people complained, why weren't we doing Lippitt Hill? Lippitt Hill had 4 times the black population as did College Hill. And why weren't we doing it? Well, I said, I'm not doing it because I'm a volunteer, and you can talk to 65 people easier than you can talk to 4,000 or 5,000. And so anyway, we went out and got a little money. It took us 20 years, busy doing other things. And we have a little money to capture the oral history of people who lived on Lippitt Hill, though they believed at the time, the city named it Lippitt Hill for urban renewal purposes. The city does that. The city has 23 neighborhoods now. So we believe at Stages of Freedom that it's important to get the history from the folks who lived it, not from a historian with a PhD or a master's or whatever. They can do it too. I'm not opposed to scholarly work. But it's often fascinating to hear from the folks who were on the ground, who lived something. And you get a different story. We're going to have to do part 3. A whole lot of people did not come tonight. They think the wind's going to blow, and so they didn't come. So we didn't plan to do part 3, but we will do part 3 for all the absentee people. So I want to thank each of you for coming. At any point, if anybody has something they want to interject or a question they want to ask, or someone on the stage is talking and they've missed something, and you want to add to it, you let me know and we'll figure out how to make that happen. Because again, this is the voice of people. And then the observers observe, and then at the end, any observers who want to raise a point or ask a question, please feel free to do so. So we're going to be able to, we're going to be able to capture anybody. Well, we'll figure it out when the time comes, how to do that, and I assume just with the mic. So, any thought before we start? And again, is there anyone sitting here who lived or worked on Lippitt Hill, University Heights, who wishes to join the others on the stage? Please feel free to do so. I would be very grateful. Can I remind everybody that we're trying to capture the history. There are several people here who have it. I don't have it. I wasn't here. And if you want to speak up, please do so. We appreciate it. We're going to put this work in probably 49 libraries. We're going to give it to community centers. The hope is that this history stays alive in a changing environment, as everybody here knows. So, then we're going to have fun, just for you. Can you pick up the mic and introduce yourself briefly?
My name is Meredith Spicer, the widow.
Did you turn it off? Turn it on. Okay, put it closer to your mouth.
My name is Meredith Spicer, the widow.
My name is Naomi Jax Brown.
My name is Elliot Vernon Clement at 150 Lippitt Street.
My name is Ed Hooks. My family lived on Page Street, 105 Page Street, 108 Page Street. I'm also a historian.
Tell us what street you
Where I live? On
live in. Nope, nope.
Sorry. I lived from the time of the Second World War till I was married in '54 on Dwight Street, between Lippitt and Howard.
I, Naomi Brown, or Jax Brown. I lived at, on Lippitt Street, 75 Lippitt Street, 92 Lippitt Street, 82 Lippitt Street. And then I moved to Carrington Avenue, 41 Carrington Avenue, and now I'm on Doyle Avenue. And then I was on Cypress Street.
So tell us, are any of the houses on Lippitt Street still standing?
None.
Okay, because you lived on Lower Lippitt.
I lived on the lower Lippitt, yes.
Okay. Anyone else's house still standing?
I lived at 150 Lippitt Street, and house is no longer standing. Martin Luther King School is on the property where I lived.
Anyone else's house still standing?
I'm happy to say my youngest of 4 children bought the house around 30-some years ago on Dwight.
So just for everybody's information, probably 3/4 of Lippitt Hill is removed and 1/4 still exists if you treat Lippitt Hill as going all the way to Hope Street. Okay, so we have the basics. We know our respondents, who you are. I want to thank you very, 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 very much for coming. So we're going to ask a series of questions, and you feel free to just go on and answer, but try to stick to the question, okay? But again, I'm not telling you whether you have a minute or 5 minutes. You just talk as long as you want in regards to the question. Now, I was asked, so you want to start with the wonderful and the sweet and move to the normal, or you want to start with the normal and move to the sweet? You want to end on a sweet note? Okay, so we're supposed to ask about death. We don't like talking about it, but it's a fact of life. So someone the other day asked me about if anybody remembers funerals, and if there was anything special in that black community in regards to funerals, funeral parlors.
Yeah.
So pass it down.
Nenny's funeral parlor was on Only Street. We had another white funeral home was on the corner of Doyle Avenue and Camp Street, which was they also had a laundromat down on the corner of Doyle and Scott Street. And on Camp Street, there was many businesses.
So that funeral parlor on Camp was there pretty late, wasn't it? Because it was there when I came.
It was Friends Funeral Home.
Right.
It was there for years.
You want to pass it down?
I remember funerals. I remember watching funerals as they processed down Camp Street. I watched them as they went down Only Street. I watched them as they went down Lippitt and Doyle, many to the North Burial Ground.
Okay.
And in those days, when I was younger, a lot younger, there was a carriage. I remember when I was real young, I do remember the wagons being horse-drawn. I remember the people walking in back. I recall that my grandfather stopped and took his hat off. And I just took his hat off. Did you know him? He said, you don't have to know him, but you know that he lived and he deserves respect. And so and then I noticed that a lot of men stopped, and women, but the men that stopped all took their hat off as the procession went by.
So was there a little bit of New Orleans feeling to any of this?
No, I don't recall it.
But following the carriage to the grave is,
No, I don't recall that. I just recall that.
no, but you said people followed.
Yeah.
The carriage.
Yeah, they followed the carriage. It was from, like from the churches, they followed it right over to
To north,
yeah,
which is just 4 or 5 blocks.
yeah, over to the North Burial Ground, and that was it. Later I learned that, people went back for for a dinner and the like later. But again, I was small, and first time that I recall, paid attention to it.
Okay.
Later on, of course, you had the herds and everyone driving, or those that can drive, drove.
So final question about North Burial Ground. So almost everyone was buried there. Yes?
Well, those that I recall seeing, because I'm living on Bates Street, I'm living in that area.
Yeah.
So those that I'm going to see that's where they're going. I am pretty sure that probably some went to other locations,
Okay.
but the ones that made an impression on me were those that I saw that went to North Burial Ground.
So let's talk about something else that didn't come up last time at the last session. There wasn't much talk about interracial friendships or associations. Now, this neighborhood, depending on who you listen to, was anything from 10 to 25% white. Do you remember that? Do you remember?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this neighborhood was
Self-sustained.
black, Portuguese, white. On Bates Street. Oh yeah, Jewish, because you had old Tattlebaum who lived, one door up. You remember Tattlebaum's Market? Okay, he lived on Bates Street. Across the street lived the Polish family. Remember that we called her Miss Louise, and they had a fine-looking Chrysler that they parked. Parked across the street.
Now, remind people most people don't know, Bates was near Camp, ran from, tell us where Bates was. Remember, all these streets are gone.
Yeah. Okay, those that, people have done every one of them.
Right.
On Bates Street, on Mallet Street, Millette.
Yeah.
Mallet.
Whatever, go ahead.
No, because you hit with a mallet. Millette Street halfway. Bates Street ran from.
Do you want to pass the microphone?
Yeah.
Bates Street ran from Millette Street, which was off of Only Street, and it ran down all the way to a dead end. Then there was like a wide open driveway, and it went up to Camp Street. But Bates Street went from Millette Street all the way down into Lippitt Street again. And the Bates Street Playground sat over that area.
Right, there was one little side street there that,
This is all near Only Street. We're on this side of Lippitt Hill.
yeah,
Okay. Now, the reason I want to talk about Bates Street is William J. Brown's, you know his
well, I can
story.
tell you a little bit more about William J. Brown.
So tell us about him and Bates Street, though. Let's stay there.
Okay, well, my family lived on property that descendants of William J. Brown owned.
Yes.
One was 105 Bates Street, which was 3 lots, and at one time was owned by the New Century Club, which was a club of the ladies, mainly from Meeting Street AME Church and the Pond Street Church, and they had a house, 5 bedrooms. It had a parlor, it had a music room, a dining room, kitchen, and it had central heating. And that property was owned by the Browns. Across the street, 108 Bates Street, that property was owned by Mr. Sidney Brown at one time, and he sold that property to my aunt and uncle. Down the street,
What is your aunt and uncle's name?
Rollins.
Okay.
Janice Rollins.
Huh?
Janice Rollins' parents?
Yeah, Janice Rollins' parents.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Down the street at 94 was Frederick Brown.
Right.
Frederick Brown was he was a chauffeur. Oh, gee, I forget everything that he did. But you always saw him coming home with his suit and his tie. Yeah, I mean he was dapper.
So was he a grandson?
He would have been, I believe that he was a great-grandson.
Okay.
I believe he, in my tracing of the history of William J. Brown, I believe he was a great-grandson.
So we should, for the camera's sake and history, William J. Brown wrote famous book. And it is his family history, the Browns of Providence, the Lippitts, and everybody else, and everybody in between. And it is a stunning autobiography in the form of memory.
Yeah, well, when I was tracing the history of the house that my grandmother was at, my grandmother, my grandfather, besides learning that it was owned at one time by the New Century Club, etc., the New Century Club, that group of women, the house was for girls or for the working girls. And these were girls that mainly grew up in the Providence shelter for colored children. And when they got too old to be there, they then went to this house where they learned the skills and how to dress and how to be, and went out and got jobs. Many of them worked for the American Screw Company, which was just down the hill.
Basically on North Main.
And North Main Street, yeah.
Can you say that correctly?
Yeah, well, it was on North Main, bounded up by, yeah, well, the area, the factories that were involved in what was known as hard scrabble. Hard scrabble was the area between Washatchek River, Charles Street, Randall Street, North Main.
So a ton of factories down there where the hotel is now.
Yes,
Okay. What hotel are we talking about?
Marriott.
Oh, okay.
Marriott.
Marriott. So let's go back to interracial stuff for just a minute, and then we'll move on. You having childhood friends of different races? You were talking about families.
Plenty of
Did you have
Went to school. Went to T.A. Doyle School.
name names?
That was a mixed school. Right now, I can't recall any of the fellows' names or the girls' names right now, but it was a class, we was in that class. And most of the teachers were white in the school, and they were ladies. The principal was white, and he was the principal of two different schools, Doyle Avenue and another school up on Charles Street area.
So,
His name was Mr. Peabody.
Yeah, old Peabody.
old Peabody.
Yeah, I remember.
Was he always old?
Mr.
Well-
Patrick was his secretary.
No,
So,
Peabody was and I told him this to his face while he was still living. Because what he would do, when I went to the Windmill Street School, it didn't take him too long to call any of the black students, which weren't too many at the Windmill Street School, nigger. And he called me nigger, and I told him that his mother was one, and he took me in the room and beat the devil out of me. No, I'm serious.
now what year was that,
Uh,
roughly?
This was about 1951, 52.
And he didn't want you there.
Yeah.
So most of the black students went to Doyle Avenue?
Yeah, no. In that area,
Yes.
because Providence was on a different school system then. Most of the black students, when they started school, went to Benefit Street School. And that school held about 100 students, and it only went up to the 3rd grade. That was an elementary school, or primary school. Then you had the elementary school, which was the Doyle Avenue School, and that actually went up to the 6th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade?
sixth grade.
Yeah, I didn't go there, because I bounced around quite a bit. But my cousins did. Janice and Leslie and Jimmy, they all went there.
Did you go to Benefit Street?
No, I didn't. No, I went to Doyle Avenue. There was benefit, if you lived in the area, you went to Benefit Street.
If you lived on College Hill.
Yeah. And then I was on Lippitt Street, I went to Doyle Avenue School. And then from Doyle Avenue, I went to Nathan Bishop, and then Hope. But some of the other kids, like my kids, they went to Summit Avenue, some of them, because the Doyle Avenue School was closed. Or they went to John Holland, and then there was Jenkins Street School.
Jenkins Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends on what area or what street you lived on, what school you went to.
What year did Doyle Avenue burn down?
They tore it down. They tore it down. They tore it down.
They
Yeah.
tore down
burned
Benefit
down.
Hill. Didn't it have a fire?
Yeah,
Burned down.
it had a big fire.
Okay, it had a fire, we just heard
He
it.
was,
And we're hearing 66.
Yeah, right around
Okay, say that out loud. What year was it?
It was 66 that the Doyle Avenue had a fire,
Okay, but,
and it was burned down.
yeah.
That was in conjunction with what else was going on in the world at that time. That's why I
So
called it
this
fire.
is part of the record, that during taking the neighborhood down, there would be fires. We'll leave it at that. I'm an ex-Detroiter, I know about those things. Okay. Let's talk about church for a couple minutes. You remember the synagogue?
Yeah.
Yep. The synagogue was on Scott Street, which is now on the corner of Camp and Washington. That was the synagogue. Right? Then there was a Greek church on North Main Street, Polish church. And was Holy Name. There was Only Street Church was down further on Only Street.
Facing
They had a
right.
big staples,
Steeple.
steeples in them.
A little version of First Baptist.
Yeah.
So say that out loud, don't make me say it. A little version of First Baptist.
A little version of First Baptist.
Okay, well, you had the Polish National Church, which was formerly Church of the Redeemer, an Episcopal church. And I gotta say that because what is important is that when the Episcopal Church sold the old Church of the Redeemer to the Polish National Church, the Episcopal Church retained part of the property that the old Church of the Redeemer was on. And this is significant.
This is on North Main.
Yes, this is significant because in 1948, Church of the Savior, which was a black church led by the Reverend Moore Brown, they broke ground for their own church at that time. And do you remember, it had the steps that went alongside it. The Church of the Savior,
Say again, this is on North Main.
this is on North Main. Church of the Savior, when they took the area, Church of the Savior became the relocation center for people to move out of the area.
So you just said something interesting, I hope everybody heard it. The Episcopal Church is segregated.
No, the Episcopal Church was not segregated. was it?
And why wasn't it segregated?
Okay.
If the black folks were all in one church.
Okay. To understand the history of Church of the Savior, you have to go back to the National Episcopal Conclave in 1890, at which time they said, you know, we don't have any black Episcopal churches. So then, in Rhode Island, you had the bishop, she was a member of that Colt family. Perry,
Yeah, DeWolf.
Bishop Perry, he stole the Reverend Moore Brown from Meeting Street AME Church and turned him into an Episcopal priest. And then went over to St. Stephen's Church, which was 25% black, and took the blacks out of St. Stephen's Church and said, Reverend Moore Brown, this is your church, and we're going to call it St. Augustine's, and they put it in the little church that was up on Boston Street, It's a small little chapel there, but they couldn't survive there. They moved around, they went to the old St. Stephen's Church, which had become Church of the Savior, and the people that were in that building, of course, had moved on to become St. Martin's, but they told the black church, well, you can use that building, but only if you change your name to Church of the Savior.
So I'm going to stop you here because this is fascinating history, which we have studied. An Episcopal church that is interesting.
Yeah, well,
And then later, which we haven't got to, that is black folks get to go to St. John's and worship in the back by themselves. And
no, that's
Why?
not true. No,
Okay.
no. My family,
We have to talk about, I don't want to argue, but we have to talk about what year something goes on.
my family went from St. Stephen's
Yes.
to, excuse me, St. John's. My aunt, Edna Rawlings, who became Edna Rawlings, was a member of the choir, and clearly you can see her and a couple of other black faces sitting in the youth choir in 1935. She would have been 15. So the church was integrated. Only when Church of the Savior came and Church of the Savior wanted to stay together, and they worshiped in the chapel of St. John's. And unfortunately, that's how this thing of the Cathedral of St. John's being segregated came from.
Now, we have to get back, because we're on College Hill, and we got to get back to Lippitt Hill. So, everybody remembers all the churches, and they basically survived and got bigger and better when they left. Yes? The new ones, the new buildings. Well, I'm interested in your opinion.
There also was a little church in the storefront on Camp Street at one time. Right next, you had the building that Pace Shoe Shop was in. The little church started there. And that church started down on Lippitt Street. They built nothing but a foundation. They said, go and get the rest of the money together to build a church. So they moved up on Camp Street in a vacant building up there.
And how long was that there?
How long? 40 years ago,
So it came down.
it came down.
Anything else about church before we move on? Ms. Brown, which church did you go to?
Well, I went to Only Street,
You went to Only Street before?
yeah, and then my aunt had a church, that little small church next to Pace.
Yeah, it was on
Yeah,
the street.
it was a Pentecostal
What
church,
was your aunt's name?
Alice Hector,
Okay.
and she had a little church there, and she moved from there to Wickenham Street. Right. Yeah, she was at 240 Wickenham Street. No, but before she was on Camp Street, she was on Council Street,
Where is council?
over there where the post office is.
The post office now, College Street area.
So it's gone.
It's gone, yeah. And then she moved up on Camp Street. And she passed away, and the building is still there on Camp Street, 190 Camp. And her niece took over, and she started the Camp Street Community Ministry.
So she created that.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Question?
Hi, my
Yes.
name is Vincent Clement, and I'd like to ask with regard to the wakes and the repasses. Did any of you individually ever attend a wake at someone's house as opposed to the funeral home? And was this a common practice?
It wasn't.
Can you
It
pass
was
the
common
mic?
practice.
No, whoever's gonna answer.
Well, in the days that you're talking about, I really didn't go to wakes and funerals, but I observed one that was in a house, and they carried the body in the casket. The body stayed there for 2 or 3 days, I guess, before they had the funeral and whatnot, and they moved the body out. But I didn't go to any funerals when I was that young. If anything, when the funeral was going on, I had to go that way. Under orders.
Yes, when my grandfather died in 1957, the wake was at 105 Main Street. And he was in that room where the piano was, in the back. Because we had a parlor, and then you had the music room. He was in that music room. And my sisters didn't want to go in there.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about stores again. I know you like to talk about them. So I hear comments about these fabulous meat markets, and what's true?
Well, there was a meat market
Diamonds.
for the diamonds on Camp Street. And mostly you had poultry in there. If you wanted meat, you had to go to fish barns across the street. They had meat there.
Both on Camp?
And they also had the First National on Camp Street, which is now down on end of Blackstone Avenue, Blackstone Boulevard. That started on Camp Street. Then they went to Hope Street. Then they moved down to where they are now,
So you're talking about East Side Market,
inside market.
East Side.
It's that marketplace.
And so it started on Camp Street,
Yes. It was under the name of the First National.
okay, which was a national chain.
Chain.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
They had A&P on Camp Street also.
Okay, I was waiting for you to tell us that. They had
A&P on Camp Street.
how big was it?
Wasn't really, it was big to us. Small pig.
Well,
So
you got up that far.
I
You got up that far. You're not wrong.
I saw it on a map, because the first time somebody told me there was an A&P there, I was skeptical. Because, I grew up with real A&Ps, and this was a small A&P. Yeah, I didn't even know they had them like that.
Next to the A&P, I touched you on, well, next to the A&P was one of my favorite candy stores, run by 2 ladies called the Beckett's.
No, the Beckett, no, the A&P was for the Beckett's. The Beckett's were next to Dave's Market.
No,
Dave's,
A&P was on the corner. Dave, that market was on the corner.
yeah, Lippitt in Camp, that was Dave's Market. Mrs. Beckett,
Miss Beckett was next door.
no, Miss Beckett was next door to Dave's Market, because she owned
that building.
Yeah, she owned that whole
Is this
building.
where the church now, is this where the church now is, or on the other side?
Oh, no, that's
That's
gone.
gone.
No, I'm asking, where was it? Where was her store?
Miss Beckett was on Camp Street.
Camp and what?
Camp and Lippitt.
Camp and
Oh,
Lippitt.
further in.
Yeah,
She's
Camp
in the
and
middle.
Lippitt.
Yeah, there was a,
Where the school is.
Harry's,
yeah,
yeah,
but,
Harry's Spa was across the street. from Miss-
Harry's
Harry's Spa.
Spa.
And can you identify which of these are black-owned and white-owned?
He's
Oh,
all,
white on.
he's all white on.
Wait on. In fact, if you go,
A&P.
if you look across the street, you go across the street from the Martin Luther King School, there's a fence, and this is probably a good time to see it. You'll see a fire hydrant on the other side of the fence.
Right.
That would have been at the corner of Lippitt and Camp.
Oh, so they haven't got around to removing the fire hydrant yet, 40 years later.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a photo tomorrow. So, how many of these businesses were Jewish owned? Roughly. Did you know, when you were a kid, did you know?
Yeah.
Did you know?
I knew Tattleball.
Okay.
Yeah, you knew Tattleball.
And did you know A&P and National, that they were national stores? Did you know that as a kid, that they weren't local?
No.
They were just stores.
It's stores.
And then the candy store was a real candy store?
Real candy.
Like they used to have,
Yep.
not candy on the side,
No.
a candy store.
There was a cleaners on Camp Street, 2 cleaners.
Cleaners, what were they called?
What was?
Cleaners. Now,
One was next door to Sutton, who was a Jewish guy, who used to be a tailor.
he was a tailor.
He was a tailor. There was cleaners next to him. The Granny Cleaners was across the street, and that's it was owned by the Grannies, but they had black ladies working in there.
So, how many of these businesses had black employees?
See, Harry spotted the cleaners. Visualized market after a while, I had so many of them was black folks working there. Diamonds, I worked there myself, sweeping up and throwing boxes out, stuff like that. It was like, guess,
Diamonds. What was it?
Diamonds was poultry. He sold poultry.
You told us that earlier.
Yeah. He was on the corner of Gap and House Street.
So, Camp Street was a real little business district.
Yeah.
Funeral parlor on the one end. What was on this end? What was on the only street end? Business-wise. What was on that corner?
Houses. There's no business.
There were houses.
Yeah.
Only thing on there was a doctor's office.
Yeah, there was a dentist, there was a black dentist over
The
there.
black dentist,
This is.
Fleming.
Yeah.
His wife was a school teacher in Providence,
Yeah.
Betty Fleming.
Oh, Betty,
Yeah.
who we all know. So there was another doctor on Prospect, or was he a dentist?
He was a dentist, Dr. Jackson.
Dr. Jackson, he was a dentist
Yes,
too.
Dr. Jackson.
What are you laughing at?
He was one day.
What kind of doctor? Let's be careful, he's gone to heaven, but what kind of doctor was he?
No, he was the dentist, but
He lived in a nice house.
yeah, he lived in a nice house, and I went over there with my grandfather. My grandfather had to have some teeth pulled,
Okay.
and that was about the funniest thing you ever wanted to see, because I didn't know what was happening in that room. But all I know is my grandfather came out, he didn't have any teeth, and said he's never going back.
And he didn't need to go back, right?
That's what I said.
So I get a kick out of this because on College Hill, as you know, the neighborhood's 99% white now. But you walk along and you see, you know where the black folks were, you know where the black professionals lived, you know where it's fascinating stuff to watch. Total gentrification. Total.
We have a question out here, Ray.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my question is, I know Bailey was a black-owned funeral home, wasn't that on Camp Street? And
Bailey.
who was, how long were they there? Bailey's Funeral Home
Bailey's
was on
Funeral
Camp Street.
Bailey's Funeral Home and Mendy's.
Right.
And Mendes was on.
Mendy's was on the corner of Doyle and Camp.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where was
Bailey, Bailey's was on Only Street, and then they moved to Camp Street.
And then they moved to Camp.
Yeah. Mhm.
for sharing. So you can totally not answer this question or save it for later, but I was wondering, so obviously the neighborhood is really different now, and I was wondering kind of when it changed and how you found out, like if you were still living there at that time, or if you'd kind of grown up and left already.
In the late 60s, when it was being torn down.
Yeah. So like how
In
did
the
you
late
find out?
60s?
When it was being torn down, where were you?
Okay. When it was.
Wait.
Okay. When it was being torn down, I was living across town, but my grandmother and my mother still lived on Bay Street. And I vividly remember an article in the paper that said, "Where will the blacks go when they take this area, when they take the Lippitt Hill area?" Although at the time, we didn't refer to it as Lippitt Hill. To us, it was the east side. And I thought, well, that's a strange thing to have in the newspaper. And the other strange thing that I found was that they had all these articles, but they didn't start showing pictures until like December of 1959. People had 2 years to move out. There were empty houses. There were people that moved out on the first floor. Some was living on the second floor. There was a whole house that was empty. There were these people that were coming in, taking off doors, taking out the Queen Anne windows, taking out the French doors, having themselves a ball. And that's when the Journal went in and took a picture of the neighborhood and said, "This is why the Providence redevelopment is taking this area. Who wants to live in conditions like this?" And I'm serious. I was amazed by it. No pictures until 1959. People began moving out in 1957. We had 2 years. My grandmother did not move. She was one of the last ones to move, and she moved in April of 1961. She fought him because she wanted more money. She got it.
And to piggyback on that, my family lived at 150 Lippitt Street, and people who were doing a demolition were told to leave the house next door to this house because people were living alone. And for some reason or other, they knocked the house down. And they did, the whole roof slipped down into the house. And my mother and father was very upset at that. And she probably still be living on the street today if she was on it. But she really didn't want to move because they really didn't want to give them nothing. And they made big promises to the people who lived in the area that they're going to refurbish the houses and they're going to be able to move back in and the rent will be a little bit more than what you're paying now. And what we saw was University Heights, and nobody could afford the rent to move in there at that time.
$125 when they started.
He has a question.
No. So what were you doing at the time that it was torn down?
It was torn down? Well, I was living at Carrington Avenue. My father had the other houses. He had about 5 or 6 houses that he rented. But we were at 41, 42 Carrington Avenue.
So you were on the upper part?
I was on the upper part.
And those are triple deckers?
Yes.
And they didn't tear those down?
No.
No. You want to share where you were when they came down? No.
as far as being in the area. After I graduated from high school, I got married in January of '54. Then I got married in October of '54. So, you know, I was a paper girl on Carrington Avenue. And I was a paper girl as a young, maybe adolescent. I started with 60 paper customers, and I went up double before I finished. Was able to get a few things with that money.
And what streets did you have other than Gary? When you had a double road?
Well, like I said, well, I hear what you're saying. I'm not too sure, because I'm 81 now.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, when I started with 60, I do remember, the bottom line was walking up with my bag at the end of starting with 60 and coming up from camp, because it was, the headquarters was on Camp Street to the right, okay? But when I was coming home with the bag on my shoulder, then people on Camp Street, the Prices, that was a kind of a nice sized family. Coming up Lippitt, I mean, people who knew me one way to see me with the bag of, you know, the paper girl. So I doubled. Like I said, I went from 60 when I started to 120.
Hi, I just have a question about the stores. Was there a store on Bay Street?
Yeah,
What street?
Was Bay Street?
yeah, there was a
Yeah.
store.
What was the name of the store?
Oh,
What was that store on Main Street?
it's run by,
Was it Tanner?
Yeah, down the bottom.
down the bottom of Bay Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where was Tannerbaum on Camp Street?
Their mom was on Camp Street, yeah.
What kind of stores?
Let's talk to him about
Variety store.
variety store.
Variety store. Don't even
And
have
there
it.
was Flunkies. Flunkies was at,
Monkeys was like that too.
Flunkies was on Lippitt
That
Street.
street.
On Lippitt Street? I asked because my grandparents and my mom's lived on Bay Street, 85 Bay Street.
There was a variety store on Bay Street.
Yeah, I got a picture of when my mother standing in front of that store.
And it was owned by the Rogers.
Right.
Yeah.
Was that the name of the store?
No, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers owned that store.
They own the building or the store?
They might have owned the building and the store.
They lived on Glen Street.
They ran the store?
Yeah.
Yeah. They got it.
And who were they?
They were Cape Floridians.
Okay, that's good enough.
And I used to hang around with the kids.
Anyone else from,
I want to ask,
wait a second, please.
hi. I want to ask with regard to when people found out that they had to move, that they had to relocate, were there any black organizations and or political people that got together to say, hey, you know, what's going on, and we don't support this, and was there some kind of protest made to the city of Providence?
Yeah, to answer your question, it was the East Side Neighborhood Association. And they used to meet at North School, and that's where they found out that what the plans were for the neighborhood. A few years before the demolition started. And everybody was being aware of that, and they lived in that neighborhood, either from a friend or if they went to the meeting or whatnot.
Today, we got a call from a 95-year-old woman named Miss Henry Lopes. Does that name ring a bell?
What's the name?
Miss Henry Lopes.
Yeah.
She was a caseworker.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about her role and if you had any interaction with her?
I didn't have any interaction
we're going to interview her. You remember her?
Yeah, I remember her, but I wanted to speak to the organizations. There were two organizations. They started as one and then they split. And because this was from older people, I'm taking information from interviews I had with Elizabeth Johnson, with my grandmother off and on. You're gonna pull the information from my aunt, from Catherine Robinson, who lived on ended up living on White Street. Okay. And they said that they started it with one organization, then it seemed to divide it in two, but it seems that the strong arm tactics of the city, which was, here's the check, get out of town before sundown, and they also said that they were going to provide better housing for them, and they tried to move a lot of people over to South Providence. Their big calling card was, we're going to take you from this flat that you're in that doesn't have central heat, because many of the houses did not have central heat. And we're going to put you in a house that now has central heat. So come live in South Providence, and you'll do A-okay. And with that, both organizations just fell apart. They just fell apart. They never were able to mount a united front such as they did on College Hill to keep their area going.
So just for the audience, there are 7 or 8 reports. The city justified everything, spent a lot of money, and some of it, including Providence Journal behavior. I won't say more than that, but you know this was a war. The mayor waged a war against the neighborhood.
Well,
So speak into them.
Okay. There were this whole thing, because of money. The first area that was going to be taken was going to be College Hill, and that involved some federal money. Well, the people on College Hill, because Christie and Brown got together with Antoinette Dowling and those folks, and they said, no, don't take this area, we're gonna fix you. And then they said, okay, well, we can't do them because they got money and they got votes and they got a little bit of power, but we don't want to give up the money. So, boom, they went over to the east side, Lippitt Hill. Providence, by the way, was the first city in the country to have a redevelopment area, and that was in South Providence. That's how the Edwin Flynn School got built, and that's how that shopping mall got built along Prairie Avenue. That was the first completed redevelopment area in the whole United States. And so Providence was going to hang on to that money, so the east side was next and the east side went.
Anyone else before we go to our next question?
to answer the question.
Man, got his hand up.
Let's stop there first.
Hi, I'm just thinking of everything you're saying in pictures, and I'm wondering if you know of photographs of the neighborhood when it was thriving that survive, and I'm also wondering if you remember anyone photographing the buildings coming down. Not so much the journal, but families, you know, neighborhood people, or both.
You know, that's a funny thing. I mean, that's a real great thing, because when they did, for every house that was being torn down, they were supposed to take a picture of it before they tore it down. You go look in the redevelopment files, and you'll find a few pictures. One is of 108 Bates Street, but you won't find one of 105 Bates Street. You'll find one of 94, but you won't find, in other words, they did not take pictures of every house that there was. They did not take pictures of the streets the way that the way that they were. They waited until the place really looked like it was a gunslinger's town from out west, and then they took pictures of it and said, this is why we are taking the area.
Do you think families took pictures? People in the neighborhood?
I'm sure they did.
I have pictures. Yeah, I have pictures.
So, we're gonna take 3 or 4 more questions.
So I've heard the names of several streets, Bates Street, Lippitt Street. How many streets were removed, and approximately how many houses were torn down in this redevelopment?
What did they say?
That man over there has pictures, he said, too.
All of Bay Street to all of Bay Street is gone. The bottom part of Lippitt Street is gone. The bottom part of Howard Street is gone. Millett Street is gone. And,
The one that came from the laundry. What street is that?
Fishman.
The one that came from the laundry.
the laundry, Howard, Camp Street. Camp and Howard, they had a laundry man.
What was it, about 435 families?
I don't know.
Well,
Would you say, somehow the number 435 sticks, comes to mind. The number of families that were displaced.
And so,
wait, you have to wait. You won't be on, you'll mess up.
So I can't visualize, so part of Camp Street, part of Olney, so there are streets that are still there, but that were full of houses that are now gone. Is that what you're saying, that Martin Luther King?
When Martin Luther King was, there was houses there.
So all of
Camp
University,
Street,
all
the way
University
Camp
Heights.
Street
Yeah.
didn't run and go in like it does now, makes a little pier and go on the Olney Street. Before went straight to Olney Street.
Okay, the way that you go on Camp Street now, when you go up Olney Street and you go to Camp Street, that would have been Millett Street. And as you come right around and that curve that goes up, that's how you would have gone up the dirt part of Millett Street by the chestnut trees. You know, the chestnut trees that were at the corner there? Well, I'm sorry, I remember those things. And then you would turn on to Camp Street. But Camp Street normally was straight as an arrow over to Olney.
Because they moved Olney Street Church.
From down by the
Olney
playground.
Street, next to, across from Pratt Street. Kirk Street was on the corner of the church. And there was another street, then they went down North Main Street.
And Bailey's Funeral Home, which
Bailey's
was once on Camp Street, went to Only
Only
Street.
Street, yeah.
Right.
It's right across the
Well, one of my favorite postcards ever, and I've only seen it one time. I'm sorry, I only have one. I've been looking for it for 35 years. You come up Pratt Street, and there is Only Street Baptist Church in the middle of the street.
Yep.
And it is a little First Baptist church. And that sickens me that they tore that church down. Just,
Mrs. Carey, her husband was a barber on Camp Street, but initially what you're saying, was the fact that, when I was a youngster, I don't know, 12 or 14, was it Brown Street, after Hope High School?
Yeah, Brown Street.
Okay, thank you. So, Mrs. Carey, I guess we used to have some type in the summer of a program before Only Street was built on Camp Street, excuse me. Mrs. Carey went to Only Street, and it was further down near North Main, but it was Only Street. And so, Mrs. Carey made sure when, for Brown and Only, they had a program around that area, and I was asked to sing. I was young, but, she wanted to make sure whatever she knew about me, that she wanted me, to sing. Let me see. And then during the Second World War, I couldn't understand because I had a grandparent, didn't live on the east side, she lived in Riverside, Crescent Park there, and she made everything from scratch. So when the Second World War, there were stores on Camp Street, and we, at some point, I had lived with her because I was born in Harlem, New York, but before my parents bought the White Street, but they came back when I was around 5 for school, 5 years old. So I couldn't understand, once we were living on Dwight with Fishman having the laundromat on Camp. However, I was used to butter with my grandmother. She was from North Carolina, but she cooked, and we had on our toast, everything. But during the Second World War, evidently, I don't know if they weren't selling a lot of butter, at least on Camp Street. But I'm telling you, I was so shocked. I mean, I was very young. I told you how old I am now. But I remember being very upset, Yeah, they had indigenous people.
so, so there's your butter story.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that was.
So we're told there are pictures on the phone. We're going to see what we can do. Mrs. Brown, why don't you talk about the picture you sent us the other day? I'll ask the question. On the porch, the picture on the porch.
Your father and brother.
Oh, my brother's right there.
Right. Fabulous.
That's the
Yeah,
photo.
that was one of the houses that was torn down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, 82? 82 Lippitt Street.
82 Lippitt.
Yeah. And I had the plans for that house, and I gave them to the Historical Society on Hope Street years ago.
To the library.
Yeah.
You have the physical plans for the
The
house?
physical plans, and I donated to them.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yes.
Do you remember what year the house was, roughly?
No, I don't.
When Whole Foods took over that market, they used to have pictures on the wall what the east side looked like. It was different pictures of Bay Street Playground, Bay Street, what was on North Main Street, and when Whole Foods there. Star Market had it first, then Old Max took it, now it's Whole Foods.
And you believe Whole Foods has some photos
They had the photos.
of Lippitt Hill from the 60s?
Yeah.
Okay, first I've heard that.
I know it's the first time I've heard that.
Oh,
Right there.
Pardon me, you remember saying photos of the neighborhood in Whole
Yeah, at
Foods?
some point, there were prints displayed. It's not a permanent thing, but I
No,
know
they
have
change
been.
their displays all the time.
Yeah. but
Okay,
it
now
was-
you're giving me homework tomorrow for me to call and see if they
Yeah,
have
no,
that.
that's true.
Okay, that's 3 people saying it.
Yeah.
So, can we, yes,
And I remember a story about Duke Ellington.
Oh, yeah.
Could you share that? Because I think the connection
Yeah,
to
well,
that club.
What happened, when Duke Ellington came to Providence, which was on the northern swing, my uncle, Carlton, Carlton Fisher. See? He played with her. Now, the Duke Ellington band used to practice at the John Hope Settlement House on Pratt Street.
15.
But one time they couldn't get in there to practice. So they ended up practicing at my grandmother's house on Bates Street.
And you are a namesake.
Yeah.
Tell the rest of the story.
Duke Ellington's name is Edward Kennedy Ellington. I am Edward Kennedy Hooks. I was named for Duke Ellington. I was born when they were practicing.
So there is a plaque on John Hope Settlement House at 15 Pratt Street, and the original plaque that Rowena Stewart wrote included that Duke Ellington had performed there, but it was too much language and they cut it off. So you want to have fun, go by. We put that plaque up 4 years ago with a party in the street. So go by 15 Pratt. It's an effort to sign College Hill. As I told you, College Hill's gone from 33% black to near zero. And there are 4 or 5 plaques added to College Hill to remind people of this history, long-term history, so that you don't have to depend on memory. You have the Gorham plaque, and Duke Ellington's not on it. We should get another plaque and put up. 2 plaques. Now,
I should add, back in those days, we were all colored.
yeah,
We didn't turn black until later, but
1970, 71, whatever.
yeah, but prior to that, we were all colored.
Yeah. So, we're always having controversy over black and over African American and all that, but nobody's colored anymore. I love to use it, people of color. I just love it. I think it's so classy. You capitalize it all. Because one of the awful problems is with black, newspapers and others refuse to treat it as a race of people. They treat it as a color. So you're reading Italian American, capital I, and then black, small b. So I don't use it. I don't use it in formal writing. So we're going to stop and give one last person who has absolutely brilliant question or statement, and then we're going to come to each of you for a final comment. So, I'm gonna walk that way, and when I get there, whoever thinks they have the most brilliant, that's who I'm gonna stop with. Actually, why don't we take you both real quick?
Hi, once again, my name is Vincent Clement, and I wanted to ask, what role did the Historical Preservation Society play with regard to Benefit Street redevelopment as opposed to the Lippitt Hill area?
Use the...
Well, excuse me, I didn't plan to speak about Benefit Street exactly. However, I think everyone should know there's a I was given this book 4 years ago regarding, I believe it's called Benefit Street, but it has pictures of my church. I've been around 30 years at Condon Street Baptist Church, and I just gave it to our new minister. He's from Wisconsin, and but I still took pictures of some of the places that have been in this Benefit Street book. I was given it as a gift 4 years ago. So
You're talking about Margaret Stillwell's little book.
yeah.
Yes. Which is stunning.
Very, excuse me?
Yeah, it's stunning.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yeah.
directly?
Yeah, I just want to say that Providence Preservation started in 1956. And of course, that was the time that they were trying to take College Hill. And again, because they couldn't take College Hill, because they couldn't take it, and because they wanted to keep the money, it became evident that they were going to take the east side very quickly. It wasn't as quickly as they took a couple of other areas. It's kind of like the city learned as they were going along. But they did take the east side. It became known as Lippitt Hill, and that started 1957, and I guess by 1962, 61, 62, everything was flattened,
And their photos of Lippitt Hill with nothing on. Is that your question? You know, we know Antoinette Downing saved College Hill with the help of Mrs. Chase and others. And she I talked to her about Convent Street Baptist and why she didn't save that church if nothing else. Because of its architectural standing, it's equal to anything on College Hill today. And she told me, we had a whole bunch of these conversations. And I want to be brief because I'm not supposed to be talking, but she told me she didn't have the power. The mayor just would have nothing. The mayor would not cooperate at all.
Who was the mayor?
Reynolds.
yeah, Reynolds was the mayor then. Flynn was the mayor then.
So I don't have a question, I just have a statement. I'm not from Providence, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. And they did the same thing in Baltimore when they developed the Inner Harbor area, around the Inner Harbor, exactly the same thing. They moved all the folks out and took the property. When I first moved to Providence, the first place I lived was in University Heights. I lived at 11 Stephen Hopkins Court. And had I known the history that I know today, I think I would have made a different decision as to where I was going to live.
So, this is your closing remarks.
Well, I'm glad I made it down here to this forum. I think that it should be more publicized, either on, everybody's on Facebook nowadays, or in a journal, or both of them. They still have both papers. And word of mouth. To get more people, involved that lived in that area, that don't live there no more, or are still living, to come down and say what they remember about Lippitt Hill and all that, with school and Jenks Street School, Benefit Street School, and the whole area there. It was a private area. There was a lot of stores on Camp Street, a few on North Main Street, when you really didn't have to go anywhere. Because you wanted to go to a bigger market, then you went over there to the Big Bear Market. Everybody went to do their shopping, do with the weekly shopping and everything.
Well, I'm glad I attended. I brought my brother. He's here from California, but he didn't get up to say anything. And my other brother was on that picture with my father. He's here also, but he didn't get to say anything. I don't know whether they want to say anything now.
I got a story
Okay.
about you. Well, my father, I'm Ralphie Jacks. My father had a barber shop on the east side, Lippitt Hill, in 3 or 4 locations. And the story I remember is, I was down at the barber shop one day, and Naomi was down at the barber shop, and there was a bunch of people at the barber shop. And his barber shop was right where Martin Luther King School is, on Camp Street, right on the side. And I was wondering why all these people were at the barber shop. It was because Fats Domino was getting his hair cut at my father's barber shop because he was playing down at the Celebrity Club. And Naomi was in there trying to get his autograph. That's my story.
Speaking of music, my uncle, Robert Smith, left Rhode Island. They lived on Howard Street, 222. And he left Rhode Island and joined Erskine Hawkins' band while it was in New York. He wrote a song that was very popular for a while called Tippin' In. So I was always very proud of that. Once upon a time, there was the Celebrity Club, and next door to it was Carl's Dickens. It happened that the niece, Madeline, who was one of the salespeople in Carl's Dickens when it was in front of next door to Celebrity Club. Sugar Ray Robinson went to Madeline at the store because she had records and he wanted to borrow one so he could practice before the night of Celebrity Club. When he returned the record, and this was in 1953, when he returned the record, he thanked Madeline and said, was there anything that he could do to say thank you a little more? She had an uncle, James N. Williams, who was the head of the Urban League at the time in Providence. But he was married to Madeline's aunt, Nellie. They lived on Dwight Street, which was right where I lived. Mr. Bell's house was where they lived. My parents owned during the Second World War, Dwight. So when Sugar Ray brought the record back to Carl's Dickens' record, he said, what can I do to say thank you? And since she was related to the head of the Urban League, James N. Williams, they knew because there were youngsters, Pat Stockett Matthews, Meredith DeBritto, Spicer DeBritto, sorry. There were several of us that were getting awards. And that's what Sugar Ray was told. Everyone would be very pleased if, when the young girls who were seniors in high school could, you know, that Sugar Ray Robinson could come to the award where it was, the awards were being handed out. So, only reason I know it was 1953 because it still says it. But this is, I was given this. I think I got first prize. Pat Stockett, she received something, and one other young lady who's left Rhode Island, I don't remember. But Pat lived across the street on Dwight that I did, so I never forget that.
I just like to say that having lived in the area and also doing my own little bit of history writing. In fact, I am presently writing the history of blacks in Providence. I'm starting in 1784, and I'm actually up into my third volume. I just work on it, and then more and more comes in. But it just amazes me that an area that was originally settled by free blacks and some slaves who lived there on the northern side of Oney's Lane. And we know that from history, we know that they were there at least from 1680, that the area was taken after riots over in the early 19th century riots, all the way up into a nice, what was considered, what those of us that were living there at that time considered a nice neighborhood, that the area was just wiped out. And of course, later we got to know it as, it wasn't urban renewal, it was Negro removal. And that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So everyone who left their email there will get a copy of the tape. And everyone who left their email will get an opportunity to probably pay $1 for the transcript that Ben is putting together. And I want to thank Providence Journal for the fabulous story they did the other day. And if you get Stages of Freedom's email, you've gotten it. Very funny things going on in the world. It shows my age. There was a time when you ran to the paper first, and someone Xeroxed it if you missed it. Now so many people are not reading the paper, and one of Stages of Freedom's duties is to tell you when a famous jazz artist dies in New York, because that's not in the paper. But when great things happen in this community involving black life and culture, such as the wonderful article that Ben wrote on this, we hope to share it with you. So make sure your email's there for about 10 reasons. And thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
On your way out, if you'd like a flyer for our shop and museum, please see me. And we'd also, if you are so inclined, want to make a contribution to this project, we'd greatly appreciate it. And that can be done in the back as well. Thank you.
You got it? You sure?